It's time we address the most important change to this season. Tao's haircut. Whoever is in charge of the hair department needs a raise expeditiously. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another one of my TV show reviews. Today we are talking about Heartstopper Season 2. I've definitely been a huge fan of this show since the first season, but like every show I watch, I'm gonna keep it real and give my honest opinions. So before we begin, just letting you know I will be covering a little bit about spoilers, so this is your chance to leave in case you haven't seen the season yet. So let's start by talking about the characters. Nick is still definitely the central focus of the show. He gets the most screen time and the most room for character development. Last season, his entire arc was about coming in terms of his own sexuality. And this season, it's all about coming out to other people so that he can be open about his relationship with Charlie. So they do a really good job showing just how difficult it is for Nick to come out to people, even his closest friends. And at certain moments, he has to question, is he even ready to come out to other people? Because a lot of times it feels like he's overcompensating for what Ben did to Charlie. So he wants to be the complete opposite and not treat Charlie like his secret. But by the end of the season, he is able to come out to pretty much everyone and has made his relationship completely public. Nick also deals with family issues this season. We get to meet his brother, we get to meet his dad. His brother is kind of homophobic and essentially outs him to everyone, and his dad is just kind of an absent father. I also like that Nick this season deals specifically with bi-erasure and bisexual problems, so it's nice to see that kind of story being represented here. Let's talk about Charlie. So Charlie this season unfortunately doesn't get too much development. However, we kind of see him start unraveling. He puts on this facade this season where everything is great on the outside, but on the inside clearly something isn't adding up, and Nick is starting to realize this. We find out a little bit about Charlie's own coming out experience, which was very traumatic for him, on top of being in a relationship with Ben. And we see that he is able to stand up to Ben this season, and I felt like a proud father in that moment. I was like, good job, Charlie, good job. And through Charlie, we kind of go into discussions that are a little bit more heavy, such as eating disorders and self-harm. So I hope that the creators of the show can take on these topics in the next season and tread carefully with this. Also, Charlie and Nick's relationship is really heating up and getting really passionate, but I respect the creators for not making it overly sexual like other teen dramas like Euphoria and Sex Education. So speaking of Ben, let's talk about Ben. So he kind of continues being a dick this season. He is still obsessed with Charlie and treats Imogen horrendously, but we actually get to learn a little bit about why he's the way he is. So it's implied that his parents are really homophobic and he hasn't even come to terms with his own sexuality. I actually think this makes him potentially one of the more interesting characters moving forward, and we get to see a character who does not have a happy coming out story, but maybe he will get a redemption arc in the next season. Let's talk about Imogen. She is my absolute favorite character. She is such a bimbo, but she is also so smart. It cracked me up when Nick was working up the courage to tell Imogen about his relationship with Charlie, and Imogen was like,
"Is this about Charlie? Because it was really obvious."
Like, I died at that. And then when Imogen makes a whole scene at dinner and calls Ben out, that was iconic behavior of her. And I really hope she finds someone good for her and she gets more screen time in the future seasons. Next, let's talk about Elle. So Elle kind of continues this will they won't they storyline with Tao. And eventually, Elle is the one to make the first move on Tao. And this is really refreshing because we kind of always see men making the first moves, but Elle kind of switches this up. And also Elle kind of ends up wanting to go to an art school because that's where she found her crowd. So I'm curious where this is going to go next season. Are we going to see a whole separate school? Now let's talk about Tao. He is so much more likable this season. Last season he was actually just so annoying, but he seems to have grown a lot this season. He's starting to warm up to Nick and they're actually becoming friends, but he still struggles a little bit with jealousy, especially when Elle makes new friends and he starts feeling really possessive. I also think Tao is really good representation for someone who is comfortable with their sexuality and doesn't have to put on a front of being macho. Let's talk about Tara and Darcy. It's really awesome to see, in addition to a healthy couple like Charlie and Nick, we get to see a healthy lesbian couple in Darcy and Tara. And Tara is really like the Nick in their relationship. Tara is just such a wonderful person. And it's really nice to see Tara sticking with Darcy no matter what, even when they are having issues. And I like that Darcy struggles to express her feelings. I think that is something a lot of people face, so it's really realistic to see that in a character. And she really had me scared at the end of the season when she wasn't going to show up to prom. Let's talk about Isaac and James. So Isaac gets a little bit more focus on this season than before. He kind of goes on this arc discovering that he's asexual, and he's trying to figure out if he even has feelings for James. And I feel really bad for James because the school was spreading rumors about him and how he gave Charlie the hickey when he did nothing but just exist as a queer person. And I feel kind of bad for him because Isaac didn't handle his confession very well, and I hope he gets his closure next season. Now let's talk about Mr. Ajayi and Mr. Farouk. I love their dynamic this season. One was easygoing and one was just dead serious. And it's nice to see their blooming relationship. And it shows that some people do miss out on a meaningful queer youth experience, but it's better late than never to start living authentically. I definitely hope we get to see more of them next season. So this season overall was truly just a celebration of queer youth. There was still definitely conflict amongst characters, but overall, it was all celebration. The season starts off with them taking the GCSE, which I'm assuming is the equivalent of the SATs, and then they celebrate after that. Then they go on a whole field trip to France, and then it ends the season with them going to prom. So it's really just celebrating back to back to back. I think that's awesome and truly shows the ideal world of what the queer youth experience could be like. Also, I still love the little animations that they do here and there, and it really kind of feels like it's the comic book brought to life. So let's talk a little bit about the problems I have with this season. It still doesn't really feel like I'm watching a Gen Z show, even though it's about Gen Z characters, but rather it feels like I'm watching a show where millennials wrote a story for Gen Z. And it's really apparent when you realize, why are they all texting on Instagram? They all have iPhones, yet no one is using iMessage. Also, the way they text and the emojis they use, I don't know if that's how people text. It's certainly not how I text, and it was really cringing me out reading those texts. Also, sometimes the scenes and dialogues between characters feel like I'm watching a sensitivity training video. You know those videos where it's like,
someone's being homophobic to you. What would you say in this situation?
It's giving very that. Now, I do appreciate the sentiment showing what you should be doing in that scenario, but it just feels so unrealistic and very textbook kind of that it takes me out of the scene sometimes. Overall, the show was very, very sweet, but sweet in the way as if I'm almost chugging a bottle of syrup. And so sometimes it doesn't feel great. Now, I also wanted to open up a discussion about, is this show good LGBT representation? We basically have someone representing each queer identity, whether that be gay, bisexual, transgender, asexual, etc. I feel like that's awesome to see the spectrum represented across the board, but sometimes, in my opinion, it feels like we're playing Pokemon with sexuality, like we have to catch each one of them. And if anyone has a friend group like that, that is super rare and that's awesome. I wanted to ask you guys, is this the LGBT stories that we want to see? Do we want a hyper idealized world, or would we want to see something a little more realistic, a little more down to earth? So overall, for me, I give this season a 7 out of 10. Still very heartwarming, very wholesome, but there were definitely some parts that were taking me out of the immersion. So what did you guys think of this season? Let me know your thoughts down below, and if you enjoy my content, then make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on my future reviews. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone.